Hi, pre-K kids. I thought we'd do a little bit of science today. One of the things I wanted to teach you about was density. Density means how many molecules are in a given space. And some things are really dense and they sink. If they don't have quite so many molecules in a given space, they float. So if you want to get a piece of paper, computer paper to write on, we can make a scientific chart. You can write on the top density, D-E-N-S-I-T-Y. Then we're going to write the item and whether it floats or sinks. So you can make a little chart. Like, see all these things I have on the table? We're going to write those down on the side of this side of the chart. And then you're going to guess, does it float or does it sink? So make an educated guess. It doesn't matter if you get it right or wrong. Just think about it. Is it going to float or sink? If your guess was right, give yourself a little star out here to show that you were right. Okay, are you ready? Let's look at the table here. I've got, I don't know, a dozen things or so, and I've got a tub of water. And we're going to decide, do these things float or sink? So I've got a piece of wood, a blue piece of wood. We're going to put it in the water. What do you think? Does wood float or sink? Let's try it out. Oh, look at that. That blue piece of wood is floating. So on your sheet, put blue wood and mark that it floated. Now I have another piece of wood. I don't know, it's roughly about the same size as the blue wood. It's a little bit thicker. Let's see what it does. It's kind of sinking. That blue one floated right on top, and this wood is mostly sinking. So not all wood is the same. Some wood is lighter than other wood. That means the ones that sink a little bit, there's more wood particles or wood molecules in a square inch for this type of wood than there is for this type of wood. So this one has fewer molecules in it and tends to float. This one has more molecules in about the same amount of space and it sinks. But it doesn't sink all the way to the bottom. So what do you think about a big wooden spoon? Is it going to float or sink? Write down wooden spoon on your sheet. It's bigger than those pieces of wood. Because it's bigger, do you think it'll sink? Let's see. We'll see how dense this spoon is. Oh, it's, I don't know, it's about halfway sinking and halfway floating. It looks more like the blue wood than this brown wood. But they're all three are floating. You might find a piece of wood. It depends on the type of wood it is, but you might find a piece that would tend to sink. But in general, most wood isn't quite so dense and it floats. Okay, so that's wood. Should we try a rock? What do you think? Will a rock float or sink? Write down rock on your piece of paper. Now make a guess. Is it going to float or sink? Oh, Oh, that sunk pretty fast right to the bottom. Rocks are very dense. They have a lot of heavy molecules in them. This one happens to be mostly quartz. But the molecules are big and heavy and they're very compacted together. So this rock sunk pretty fast. How about a bolt? We use bolts to hook things together. What do you think? It's pretty small. It's made out of metal. Do you think it'll float or sink? Write bolt, B-O-L-T, on your paper. Oh, that sunk just like the rock. So metal must be very heavy and very dense. It's not very big, but it must have a lot of molecules compacted into a small space. Let's see, what should we try next? You guys know what this is? This is plastic that holds aluminum cans together. What do you think? Will plastic float or sink? Write plastic on your paper. Make a guess. Oh, it floats pretty well. Even when I push it under, it floats back to the top. Not all the way, but it likes to float. So it's not very dense. Even though it takes up a lot of space, it's not heavy enough to sink. What do you think about a glass jar? A glass jar or glass. Will glass float or sink? Glass. Make a guess. Looks like it floats pretty well. So an empty glass will float. If we took the lid off and the glass filled with water, what do you think it will do? Float or sink? Starting to get some water in it. What do you think it'll do? Oh, if it was filled with water, it would sink. That's because water is heavy too. And now you have water and glass in this, so it sinks right to the bottom. But if you just had a glass with a lid on it with air inside, the glass is light enough to float. Pretty cool, huh? Okay. Well, this plastic floated. What do you think about this plastic cup? Will it also float? This is a harder plastic. Yep, it's going to float too. Here's another form of plastic. This is called styrofoam, or this is what takeout containers are made out of, styrofoam. You can see up close it has little holes like air bubbles in it. So it has air and plastic in it. What do you think? Will it sink or float? Styrofoam. S-T-Y-R-O-F-O-A-M. Styrofoam. Let's give it a try. Oh, it hardly sinks at all. It floats right on top of the water. So it's not very dense. Although it's about the same size as the jar, the jar sinks a little bit, this floats right on top. So this is a lot less dense. That means the molecules are spread farther apart, so it won't sink. Have you guys ever seen one of these? This is the key to our boat. And we put it on this little rubber thing. So do you think the rubber will help the key float or sink? Let's try it. Well, the red rubbery part's floating, but the key wants to sink. So that's why boat owners have their keys on a float. How about this little penny? Float or sink? It's pretty small. It's made out of copper, which is a metal. What do you think it's going to do? Float or sink? Oh, it sunk really fast right to the bottom. Even though it's really small, it's kind of like the bolt. It's made out of metal, so they sink fast. There they go, right to the bottom. Well, now let's try aluminum foil. It's made out of metal. Aluminum is a metal. Let's set it on top of the water. Foil, aluminum foil. What do you think? Float or sink? It's not like all the other metal. It's even bigger than these metals. But it must be lighter. There must not be as many molecules. There must not be as many molecules in the foil as there are in these pieces of metal. That's my dog Chloe in the background. She's making funny noises. Okay, the last thing I have is a pink flamingo. You might want to play with this in the bathtub. What do you think? Will it float or sink? The flamingo. Here we go. Of course it floats. It's filled with air. It's plastic. We saw that plastic likes to float, and it's filled with air. So it'll float even though it's pretty big. So density. Density means how many molecules are in a given amount of area for a material. If there are a lot of molecules, that means it's very dense and it will sink. If there aren't very many molecules, if they're spread out, it means they'll float. What do you think about Chloe? Do you think she'll float or sink if we put her into the water? Well, if she swims, she'll float. That's all for now. See ya.